Hi there, welcome to the Israel-Palestine Report. Today we're going to be talking about the lack of progress on a hostage deal, despite the fact that Hamas has accepted a hostage deal that was initially proposed by Israel and by Witkoff of a partial, or I should say staggered deal that would start with the release of 10 hostages in a 60-day ceasefire, leading to negotiation of the end of the conflict. But so far, not only has Israel not said yes, it also hasn't had a substantive cabinet discussion about the issue. But that's about to change. Every head of the security force in Israel, so that means IDF, Mossad, Shin Bet, and even the head of the National Security Council, Tzachi Hanegbi, who's very close to Netanyahu, support taking this deal. And some of them are very frustrated with the fact that Israel hasn't answered to the offer that is on the table. A top source in the Israeli security apparatus told Dana Weiss of Channel 12 that, quote, hostages could already have been home a week ago, suggesting that the opportunity for this partial deal or staggered deal is very real and very actionable. Meanwhile, Netanyahu and Ron Dermer continue to claim that this isn't a serious deal and that it will only lead to the release of some of the hostages. Now, what Israel's doing instead is it is planning an operation to take over all of the city of Gaza. Right now, it's operating in one of the major neighborhoods of Gaza, Zaytun, which, if you saw, the New York Times showed photos of how it had been flattened over the past 3 weeks. Hamas's military spokesman, Abu Ubaidah, warned that the hostages are at risk because they're held alongside fighters in combat zones with Gaza. He also said that if any of them get killed, they are going to release footage of that. So not so much a threat to kill hostages themselves, which is something that Hamas has done before, but rather making it clear that hostages could very well die in this operation if the operation proceeds. And we got a very clear picture of what could happen to the hostages. 2 Israeli hostages were recovered from Gaza over the last 24 hours. One of them is Ilan Weiss, who's considered a hero for the way he defended his family on October 7th. And there's also another body that has been recovered, and probably because of problems with identification, has not been identified yet in the media. That won't happen until the family is informed of their fate. So we know what could happen to the hostages. The danger to the hostages has never been higher. Officially, Israel believes 20 hostages are still alive out of the 48. We know that Trump recently said that he believes it's a lower number than that, maybe 2 fewer than that. There's good reason to believe, based on what I've heard and based on previous precedent, that Trump is correct, that he's getting better information, and of course he, isn't very good at keeping things to himself. So what he said is likely correct. Unfortunately, maybe 18, 17, 16, something like that are believed to still be alive by Israeli intelligence. That all means that it's very pressing to get a deal. And the Israeli public certainly believes that that is the case. A recent Channel 12 poll showed that 60% of Israelis want a hostage deal now, while 31% of Israelis support a full conquest of Gaza instead. So there's no question for most Israelis, the hostages are more important. That doesn't mean a majority of Israelis don't support the operation to take over all of Gaza. Far from it. But it does mean that they think that there's more urgency to getting out the hostages, which empirically is inarguable that is the case. There really is no argument, as far as I can see, against getting those 10 hostages back in a partial deal now and then negotiating the continuation of the war. Either way, you can break off the negotiations and restart the war if that's your goal. Shouldn't be your goal. The operation in Gaza is going nowhere and there's a genocide. But even if that is your goal, why not save the hostages? And former IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot, now in the opposition, has talked about how Netanyahu has changed his mind over what kind of deal he's seeking. For months, Netanyahu said he wanted a partial deal. For months, Netanyahu argued against ending the war. And then as soon as his framework of a partial deal was accepted by Witkoff and accepted by the mediators and accepted by Hamas, he moved on to an all-encompassing agreement, which before he had opposed, probably because he now figures it's much harder to achieve that, and therefore the war will continue if he makes that demand. So Eidenkot said the cabinet meeting that will occur will decide whether the government saves or abandons the hostages. He accused Netanyahu of, quote, jumping from plan to plan, and said his stubbornness is backed by 68 MKs who ignore their responsibility in public opinion. He accused the coalition of prioritizing political survival over the hostages' fate, warning, quote, that history will judge them for this. And as I said, every single head of the security services agrees. So even though in Israel there isn't much concern over Palestinian civilians, there isn't much concern over the international backlash regarding that, starvation, so on and so forth, most people in Israel don't support what's happening in Gaza because of the hostages and because they don't feel like the war is going anywhere. Military experts like Israel Ziv, a former general in the Israeli army, say that trying to take apart what's left of Hamas at this point could take years. And the reason for that is because there really isn't much infrastructure left. What happens now is you're looking for small tunnels. You're looking for one guy with an RPG. You're looking for one stash of weapons. You're looking for micro infrastructure, micro military infrastructure. There's nothing to break anymore because it's already been broken. Basically, Hamas doesn't have the ability to defend Gaza from the IDF. The IDF can take any part of Gaza that it wants within a few days. So we're talking about hunting down elements that can take years. The hostages obviously don't have that kind of time. It's also very unlikely that Israel has that kind of time diplomatically. As we've seen, Israel is suffering a vast amount of diplomatic setbacks. A lot of countries aren't selling it weapons anymore, the most important one being Germany. Germany still needs to tighten the ship of the sanctions that it has. And then, of course, it's also permanently, it seems, losing its support in the United States from Republicans and Democrats. At some point, something has to give, and most likely when it happens, it will be very quick. It will be like some kind of tsunami of adverse consequences for Israel. So right now, Israel is going into an operation that its only upside from a strategic perspective is to complete the genocide and complete the ethnic cleansing, which is what Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir would like to see. But from any perspective of saving the hostages, from any perspective of saving Israel's diplomatic standing in the world, it will be a complete failure. And that's why the heads of the military services are all against them. So in the cabinet meeting, which will be held next week, they will be making a stand against Netanyahu on this. But if the past is any guide to what's going to happen there, Netanyahu is going to run ramshot over them. And then again, something has to give. International community is against this. The security infrastructure is against this. The Israeli public is against this. And yet the war continues. And we've seen some attempts by Israel to justify this, release of footage from October 7th to get people angry and so on and so forth. That will not solve this fundamental problem. And the other thing that could give is how tired the reserves are, how much PTSD the soldiers are experiencing. There's an increasing movement asking soldiers not to serve, in my opinion, a justified movement, because this is not a justified military operation anymore in any way, shape, or form. So we'll be following that closely here. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media. Consider watching my podcast, The Grand Reckoning, following my history of the Holy Land podcast, and I will see you here the next time something interesting happens.